This woman knocked over everything in the house, then drew 800 cc's of her own blood and flung it all over the house with abandon, and smears it on the floor, rubbing and smearing repeatedly. The scene of the crime is created. A wooden stick is then placed in the cooker with the blood on it, deliberately leaving a gap. The victim, who was easily spotted, she then mysteriously disappears. This woman, Amy, a senior student at Harvard University. At a party, she meets Nick, the funny editor-in-chief. The two quickly warm up. The two of them soon fall in love. But there comes a time when the passion subsides. On the morning of their 5th wedding anniversary, Nick goes to the pub to complain to his sister. He is called back by a phone call from a neighbor. Back at home, Nick senses that something is wrong. When he sees what's in front of him, Nick is stunned. His wife had disappeared. Then the police arrived. They looked around the room. The attentive policewoman saw bloodstains on the wardrobe. It was clear that Amy's layout had attracted the attention of the police. Nick is taken to the police station for questioning. The house is sealed off. He has no choice but to stay at his sister's house. At night, the police came back to the scene. A letter left by Amy was found in the wardrobe. It reads Clue 1. The police are puzzled. They called for Nick. Nick explained that it was a puzzle that he and Amy had played, and guessed that the destination was his own office. Sure enough, Clue 2 was then found in the office. The letter suggests that the next destination is the brown cottage. At the same time, the police find a pair of sexy pants. Nick had a very embarrassed look on his face. The police didn't press the issue any further. Instead, they ask him where the brown cottage is. Nicky said he didn't know, but he lied. At night, he sneaks up to the cottage alone. Here he found Clue 3. The police come along. Nicky hid the letter and told the police that the house belonged to his father, and it was blue, not some brown cottage. Then he drove off. But what the police didn't know was that Nick's father's name was Brown, which means brown. Nick opened Clue 3. It reads 5th anniversary of where the candy was prepared. Nick was furious and put the letter away. A late night text message startled Nick. The moment he pushed open the door, a woman lunges frantically at Nick. This woman is one of his students. They hadn't seen each other for a long time, but Nick says it's the last time. The woman left after dawn. Nick thought he hadn't seen her, but then he turned around and saw his sister. His sister questioned him about how long he had been lying to everyone. Nick replied 1.5 years. His sister scolded Nick hysterically. At the end of the day, Nick was speaking at Amy's rescue meeting. Suddenly one of the neighbors jumped in to accuse Nick and told everyone that Amy was pregnant. By then everyone was stunned. There was an uproar. The journalists pressed Nick to ask him about it. Nick runs away. The woman in front of me had a hammer in her hand. The next moment towards her own face, because she was going to make it look like her husband had committed domestic violence. Amy has been planning this for a long time. She makes friends with her pregnant neighbor, filling her head with stories about her husband's domestic violence from time to time. She'd run up her husband's credit cards. She runs up her husband's debts. She raises her life insurance when her husband is not looking. She then buys a getaway car with cash through a website. Then she drains the family toilet, invites the pregnant woman's neighbors to her home, and takes the opportunity to obtain the pregnant woman's urine. In this way she successfully faked her pregnancy. Finally, she keeps a diary of their lives. After setting everything up, she disappears. As a matter of course, all this was done to get back at her cheating husband Nick. Nick has just returned home from a rescue meeting. The policewoman confronts Nick with the results of a laboratory test. There was a large amount of wiped blood on the kitchen floor. It didn't look like an ordinary disappearance. It was more like a murder. And we also found out that you were heavily overdrawn on your credit cards to buy luxury items, and increased Amy's life insurance to $1.2 million. Nick was speechless. He shattered his glass in anger, as the person concerned had the right to remain silent. So the police had no choice but to stop. The police went back to Nick's father's old house. After a search, they found the unburned diary in the fireplace. The diary was a record of Nick and Amy's life together, but at the end it reads,
"He may truly kill me."
Meanwhile, Nick had also cracked the secret of Clue 3 and found the house where the candy was hidden. Nick arrived at the house. The moment he pushed the door and turned on the light, he was stunned to see a room full of luxury items. Nick took one of the gift boxes back to his sister's house. They deciphered the meaning of it. Nick realizes that his wife is not missing. Amy had set it all up. Nick realizes the seriousness of the situation. He finds the lawyer who specializes in such cases, Glasses Man, and describes the whole thing to him. The eye man says it's ridiculous, but he accepts Nick's invitation to help him find his wife. He decides to help Nick get his wife back. He gives Nick the contact details of Amy's ex-boyfriend. Nick also received information from Amy's ex-boyfriend that she had staged a farce of her own. The ex-boyfriend had spent 10 years of his life in poverty. Back home, Nick follows the Glasses Man's arrangement. He says publicly that he had nothing to do with his wife's disappearance. He also admits that he cheated on his wife. He promises that he will change his ways. He hopes that Amy will give him a chance, successfully establish the image of a good man. This move was well received. Amy had been gone for 5 days. She had cut off her long hair and dyed it, changing her image completely, rented a flat in a strange place. She has met her new neighbors. She gets to know her new neighbors and gets on very well, but it doesn't last long. The new neighbor unexpectedly finds out that Amy is rich. They are hiding something. They bet Amy won't call the police. So the very next day, they robbed Amy. Amy drives away. By coincidence, she runs into her first love, Tom, at the bar. This rich first love listens to Amy's story. He decides to take Amy to his villa and settle in. This woman had tied a rope around her ankles and, deliberately making signs of having been tied up, stains her nightgown with red wine, then runs to the camera. She collapses in pain explain what was her intention in doing so. Not long ago, Amy was brought back to the villa by her first boyfriend, Tom, but Amy found that the whole house is under surveillance, and this Tom is controlling her in every way, buying her clothes, changing her hair. He wants her to look the way he wants her to look. Amy can't stand it. One night, the two of them are watching TV, and they saw Nick confessing on TV. Amy was moved. The Nick from the beginning is back. This was the Nick she loved so much, so she made up her mind to return home to Nick. She was ready to return home and be with Nick, but she needed a good reason to explain her disappearance, and Tom had just the reason to explain his disappearance. One morning, Amy deliberately kissed Tom before he left the house and bit his lip and messed up his clothes and hair. When Tom leaves the house, Amy then directed the opening scene. In the evening, Tom came back. He was so happy to see Amy dressed and waiting for him. While Tom was in the throes of passion, he took out the knife he had hidden under his pillow. He sent Tom off to heaven. By the next day, Amy returned to her home covered in blood. Nick was stunned to see this. In fact, he knew that Amy was in disguise. Nick took Amy to the hospital, and the police arrived. Amy tells the police that Tom has kidnapped her and is holding her captive in the villa. Everything seemed to make sense. The female officer in charge of the case thinks otherwise, but she was interrupted by her boss. Amy gave a ghostly smile to Nick at the door. The two returned home surrounded by a large number of reporters and fans. The moment the door was closed, Amy finally confesses everything to Nick and threatens him to do what a husband should do the rest of his life. Every day, Nick is on edge. He's afraid that one day Amy will get upset and kill him, so he wants to tell the press about it. But just then, Amy gives him a gift. She's pregnant. Nick questioned with a puzzled look on his face. Amy told him that she had removed Nick's frozen sperm from a year ago, and then the population was impregnated. She was sure Nick would not abandon her baby. Nick was furious and pushed Amy against the wall, but he didn't know what to say. The two walked down the stairs, facing the media cameras. Nick chose to compromise anyway. Amy smiles with satisfaction.